1:30. Thank you everyone for coming to this session about CoolPockets. We're going to talk about what CoolPockets are, why they matter, and go over the pilot project that we did at the Columbus Park Elementary School. This project is funded by the Massachusetts Vulnerability Preparedness Program. So we're very thankful to the state for helping us explore these ideas and concepts. We do not have identified funding yet for implementing them, so just want to say upfront. But it was a really fun project to engage with the elementary school kids community, and Pallavi is going to talk about the entire process, and there will be time for questions and answers at the end. Pallavi Kaliamanta is the Director of Climate Resilient Design at ESC Group. The city hired ESC Group, partly funded through the grant that I mentioned, to do the two designs. Another one is coming soon after, and we hope some of you will be inspired to come and participate and provide your ideas about another CoolPocket at Vernon Hill Park. She has been involved with water-centric environmental restoration work in the Boston metropolitan area for the last 2 decades. Her design practice is heavily grounded in an understanding of watershed science and engineering, with the goal of restoring natural resources and improving communities' quality of life. With over 20 years of experience in environmental planning and green infrastructure design, Pallavi brings tremendous knowledge and expertise in developing nature and community-based solutions for climate resilience. She is deeply committed to serving environmental justice communities and is a passionate advocate for climate justice. We're very happy to welcome her and tell us about this very exciting project. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you all for being here. So as Luba mentioned, this is a pilot for Worcester, and we are only taking it through concept designs phase. So hopefully, if this takes off, we'll get to work on the implementation relatively soon. But I'll just walk you all through the process that we've undertaken, both from the perspective of trying to explain the science behind CoolPockets and why they're important for a city, especially a city like Worcester, but pretty much any urban city which has a lot of pavement and other man-made infrastructure that is not serving us as well nowadays. So the idea is to figure out how we can retrofit our paved, built-up areas to make them function more like natural areas and help cool them. So that's sort of the concept behind the CoolPockets. So this is just a quick agenda of what you're gonna hear. So I'll define CoolPockets and why they matter, and what their role is in helping cities adapt. I already talked a little bit about the science behind it, but this is not something that is necessarily novel in terms of ideas. A lot of cities across the country and globally are looking at doing these kinds of interventions. And but for Worcester, since these two are going to be the pilot projects, we really want to get the process, the approach, and the final results to be co-creating those solutions with the community, because you guys are the stewards who have to be not only maintaining these places and public spaces, but it's always, in my experience, really important to involve and bring in community youth who are actually going to be the ones who are going to have the benefits of whatever strategies we put in place. So with that, let's just quickly get into what cities have already undertaken this initiative. Chelsea, which is in Massachusetts, has been calling it Cool Block. And that's kind of how the program really first started, is people were looking at different blocks in in cities where the impervious cover was large and there was not much in terms of urban tree canopy or open green spaces to be able to balance the temperatures. So the idea was to do an analysis for an entire block to understand kind of where those sections of extreme heat are, and then target resources to those particular parcels or particular sites that were identified. Another case study is in LA, another city which has a lot of impervious cover, and the city is really actively looking to essentially introduce natural elements like water, vegetation, soils, etc., so we can at least replicate how natural hydrology works in an urban context. So I mentioned the City of Chelsea's project, and they've been at it now for almost 3 years. And it's been a great success because they've really sort of marshaled youth in the community who've been the advocates to, go up to the municipalities and basically demand that the municipality bring in resources to cool streets and open spaces. So these are instances of planting that were done by the Youth Corps. There's an organization called Green Roots in Chelsea that has been working on this for a while. And this particular pilot was designed in partnership with the Boston Society of Landscape Architects. And a lot of the education and outreach was sort of done in partnership with volunteers across Metro Boston. So while there are a lot of kids who are from the community, there are also youths from all over the Boston metro area who showed up to help. So for those of you who are nerdy like me and want to know more about this, the project is called Sea Heat. Just look it up, and it kind of explains not only the data analysis that they did. This was actually done in partnership with Boston University, and parts of it were involving Museum of Science. So people were taking on different elements which go into making a successful Cool Pocket or Cool Block project. But the idea was to not only educate everybody about how and why heat is even much more sort of, I would say, dangerous is a very sort of loose word, but it's an invisible impact, because you see flooding, you see, issues with stormwater runoff and sleets flooded, but heat you don't see, but the impact is felt at a much greater level. And so the data that we've been seeing in cities across the globe is that that's the primary killer when it comes to vulnerable populations, elderly, younger kids. So it's become a huge, rightly so, become a huge impact that now cities are, creating positions like chief heat officers. It's a global sort of initiative. So this is sort of our local pilot that the City of Chelsea took on. And now a lot of other cities across Massachusetts and Connecticut, et cetera, are looking at how do they replicate those kinds of approaches, but also kind of make it more suitable to the context that each city is working within. So this, I mentioned the partnership with Boston Society of Landscape Architects. I brought some of my students to this kind of a community event where we were involved in, educating the youth and the school kids from the neighborhood in terms of why cooling the environment is critical, and the reason, sort of making the connections between what they're learning in school in terms of, the science of how the atmosphere warms up with increased heat and what those impacts are. So it was really critical to sort of connect what they're learning about in their classrooms to where they're living, so they actually feel the urgency to sort of be the leaders who are going to tackle this issue, because if we can't involve the youth in this movement, we don't have much hope. So I tell my 13 and 15-year-old, like, if you guys are not going to do this, you're going to be the one losing out. So get on with the program. But sometimes, because it's coming from mom, if it was coming from their school teacher, of course they would be like, yes. So every now and then they come back from school and say, Mom, the thing you were telling me like 3 weeks ago, our teacher sort of talked about that today. I'm like, yeah, I'm not just like making up stuff in my head all the time. So anyway, so coming to Worcester, as I think it was mentioned a little bit in the presentation for the Milwaukee Forest. So the city is taking on the Milwaukee Forest as part of this larger grant, and the CoolPocket design as the second component. And we have 2 sites that we're looking at. One, I'm going to essentially take you all through the approach that we've had, the community interface with the school, the Columbus Elementary School. And the second one that I'm hoping you all will show up for when we do the design charrette for that is the Vernon Hill Playground. So not sure how many of you know about this particular site or school, but like a lot of other urban schools, there's a lot of impervious cover. I mean, feels like everybody was just looking to park in the school. So it seems like they've created park, play areas out of parking lots, which is unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world, because there are opportunities to retrofit these sites all over. And what gives us a lot of hope is, as long as we are able to take care of treating stormwater and having it infiltrate through the ground, and introducing enough of a canopy structure. If it's trees, that's great. If it's not, at least we can have other strategies to provide shade for kids playing in the peak of summer. So I just wanted to sort of show you what the site looks like today. And then we came in with these brilliant minds and kind of told them what the concept was and what they were, we are looking for their advice on, and they were on it. We had like 5 different groups. No, this was just the kids, but then we gave them homework for their parents to do with them, so that there is some sort of knowledge transfer and experience shared, so we can hopefully, when we do the next site, we can have the parents come in and join us for the design. But since this was the project was centered in the school, we wanted to have them be the first sort of responders to design ideas, and they did awesome. It was really impressive, and so much energy and so much thought in terms of like why they wanted a certain kind of design element. So what we did is essentially, I kind of explained what we are trying to do in terms of CoolPockets, and told them, like, you have these small, we call them paper doll exercise. So they're cutouts of all these design elements, which are really meant to cool the lot with different strategies like rain gardens, bioswales. And those of you who were here in the previous session looking at stormwater treatment and retention. So all these design elements are beyond being a functional piece of, play equipment or other kinds of recreational uses. It really was supposed to have an environmental benefit for the site. As you can see, we had a lot of different thoughts and ideas around, where they wanted to see a rain garden, versus where, they wanted shade from pavilion, their existing recreational programming that they have pretty much, paint on this large impervious cover. But we were able to sort of glean ideas from the different groups that led this exercise to address everything from the areas that need to be in shade versus areas that are really critical for them to still have as as a recreational use, so soccer and volleyball and these sort of informal four squares, hopscotch kind of programming that currently exists on site, and we wanted to definitely keep those very much part of the final design, and then incorporate other strategies like introducing many trees, different kinds of trees, fruit trees, flowering trees, large canopy trees, depending on what the function for that urban canopy was. And that's kind of how the two kind of processes came together. The second part of the exercise that we did with them was essentially a dot voting exercise, and we sort of talked about different strategies or design elements, as we call them, from different kinds of ways to provide shade, whether it's through a large canopy tree structure or actually a shaded sort of canopy, different kind of elements that they're probably used to seeing and some that they may not kind of have seen anywhere. So we sort of explained to them, what do we mean when we say nature play? That was one of those that they're like, what's that? And I basically asked one of them, like, have you ever climbed a tree? They're like, yes. So that's part of, you're basically playing with nature. You're not necessarily having to get your equipment with you, but so we wanted to create spaces where they can actually interact with nature and kind of have a much more of an understanding of how different kind of strategies work, whether it's dealing with stormwater management or it's dealing with creating cooler temperatures. And as you can see, they had very strong opinions, and those opinions were recorded, documented, and that was part of it. I don't know if you saw that, the interpretational signage. Kids. Yeah. We're going to provide that no matter what. But you can see, these kids had a very good sense of things that are important to them. I mean, this fresh fruit thing was not even an idea we provided. This kid just came up with it. I'm like, okay, now we need to think about how we can incorporate this element in our programming. So it was really a very sort of meaningful and critical aspect of co-designing this project with them. And then, as I mentioned, this is kind of part of the homework we gave them. After they did the exercise, they brought these sheets home and sat down with their parents or caregivers and actually drew what their vision was of the site and what's more important. So they could write or they could draw, a lot of different sketches. But if you look at it, it's critical. I mean, you can see how the kid is sort of thinking about it and relating it to the site, but also how they use it. So some really interesting ways that they brought those concepts together. And yeah, look at this. This is like a place that they wanted to put their coats and hangers. So this kid drew this whole thing. And I'm like, wow, I should just get him to be a designer in my office, because he clearly has a very strong and clear vision about what the needs are, and they are providing those. Another kind of heartwarming piece was, one of the kids at the school had met with an accident, and these kids were creating a memory for her in the schoolyard. Her name was Zella, and you can see how they're like, this is the bench we installed for Zella, and she really liked to play the volleyball. So we want to have a volleyball, and she really liked the color pink. So we want the tree that we are planting in her memory to have pink flowers. So, that's kind of, even for experts like me who do this kind of work, that's not something I know anything about. So it's really critical for us to get these kinds of ideas and recommendations from them, because then they feel like they are part of the designing the solution and this is their project. And it was also really interesting when they were like, well, by the time this project gets built, we are probably going to graduate, but all the kids who are going to come after us can actually take advantage of this, which was, I don't expect that kind of deep thinking from kids, mostly because of mine, who don't at least deep think in my proximity. But it was really an amazing experience in terms of learning how they visualize their schoolyard. And again, this is sort of what came out of that exercise in terms of the different elements that we said we were going to incorporate within the design, and kind of how we do that is basically the work we were charged with. So this is the concept plan. I call it concept plan because this is essentially just sort of talking about the most critical elements, not only from a use perspective, but also from the environmental benefits. So you can see a whole range of, rain garden, bioswales, outdoor classrooms, canopy, picnic areas, different kind of urban canopy-sized trees, shrubs, permeable pavement, because that is another piece that, it was a good opportunity to explain, like, only just because you have to have some pavement for certain kind of uses, it doesn't mean that has to be concrete or asphalt. You can actually do pavement in ways that you create pavers or other kinds of materials that actually still let the rain go through the ground and infiltrate. So it was not only a good learning opportunity for us, but they also were able to pick up these kind of ideas and concepts from this. And I just sort of wanted to zoom in a little bit to show, unfortunately, this light is not doing any service to this concept, but hopefully you can make out that area being the one with picnic tables and the canopy. That's a rain garden, along with the outdoor classroom elements. That's Zella's tree right there in pink purple. That's an existing Gaga pit that we kept, and a new soccer area that we essentially are proposing with permeable paving technologies that we've thought through, but we are still sort of in the process of figuring out, what the palette looks like in terms of what uses we want to have on the site and what kind of options exist in terms of technology so that we can incorporate. Those are basketball hoops. That's an existing play structure that we added some canopy to. Those are elements of the outdoor classroom, and they wanted to have something that has it's a pollinator garden, but we sort of incorporated the two together. And there's a certain section of the site which is sort of forested for the most part, but there is a little bit of a clearing which is on a slope, and that's where we created the nature play area. So, it's not necessarily play equipment, but they're just like these stumps of trees and, things that they can do within a natural environment. So again, a little more of a zoomed in view for all the pieces that I mentioned. But of course, we are looking to accommodate the additional elements that may not have gotten, like the education sign. It didn't get too many votes, but it is critical for the kids to be able to understand kind of what the process of cooling a particular site looks like and why there are rain gardens and bioswales and other strategies that are important for doing that. Similarly, we talked about the large canopy trees where it makes sense to have that kind of intervention versus smaller trees like dogwoods, which was the tree that was selected for Zella's memorial tree. And we essentially introduced water features around those areas so that in the peak of summer, there is some exposure to water. We also introduced water fountains, but this particular one, talks about different kinds of permeable paving options that exist. Some of them have artificial turf and others have pavers with grass. So you can pick the surface that works for the function that it's supposed to be providing, but there are plenty of options. So we're not necessarily constrained with, being able to having to provide this program because it's a matter of picking the right materials and elements. Similarly, the aesthetic for a bioswale or a rain garden could be whatever you want it to be. Of course, the plant palette has to be very much picked based on the kinds of plants that do well in the planting condition, but there is a large range from which you can pick out the planting as well as other elements that make for different kinds of bioswales or rain gardens. And then the urban canopy, which, it was a really one of the features that they loved. I guess it was just a matter of them understanding that there is a flexible way we can create canopy, which can essentially be designed with panels or modules, which can be essentially articulated based on the movement of the sun and which area needs to be. There are areas where you can manually move the angle, but most of these are available as components, and you basically bring it together based on where you're installing it. So you kind of figure out the movement of the sun, and then I mean the ones that are kind of manually movable are more expensive, but in my opinion, they're also if they're not maintained, there is always that danger of it not working, and then that makes it really a much more of a problem than a strategy. So, and then I talked a little bit about having access to water, whether it's just to fill their bottles or having a water fountain incorporated within the yard, so they don't have to necessarily go inside to fill their bottles every time they have to have recess or go out to play in the yard. To actually having misters. So these are they can be done in so many different ways, from the most expensive to the most sort of effective. Something like that in the middle doesn't cost much at all, but it is so effective for. So this is an example that we did in Chelsea, where we basically had movable systems that we installed the misters, so you can pack them up and put them away during the winter, but then you can have them sort of hooked into the water supply over the summer months. So there are ways you can introduce these elements which don't have to be cost prohibitive, but it really makes a big difference. So these are just I don't know how I'm doing with time, but these are just okay, I don't have to rush them. But these are essentially renderings that we created. So, it was incredible how much the kids were able to kind of relate to the plan view. But a lot of times it's hard for, them to understand kind of what that will do to the space. So we created a model and then put in all these elements that we had conceptualized with them to give them a sense of how the yard will be transformed. So this basically has the soccer field, that's Zella's memorial tree. Those are the sort of painted play four squares and hopscotch course that we retained. Those are the basketball hoops right there. That's the outdoor classroom and pollinator garden. So the idea was to sort of make that all part of how the space is being currently used and how that could be improved. Just, yes.
Yeah, I was just curious, it seems like you also show the shade, the potential shade anyway.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of, is that 10 years out or?
That's a really good point. So in places that we are putting, smaller trees or low canopy, it's going to take a while. I mean, trees take a while to grow, but there are areas that we're using those kind of shade structures, which can be immediate. Like, so the area that has the play equipment that they wanted nobody to touch because they love that. So all we did was create a sort of a system of modules that will protect that from direct sunlight during the summer. So that can be immediate as soon as this goes in. But other places where there's natural, foliage that needs to leaf out will probably take a little longer.
I just want to comment that when it comes to getting a grant to do it, it would be really helpful to kind of know if we bought these kinds of trees.
Oh yeah, sure.
It'd be nice to know because that would be a selling point. You might be able to raise more money.
Absolutely, and it's funny because the forest that is being planted is like interesting because we are doing that in real time. Like the design and implementation is pretty much happening like one after the other. But here we have a little more time because we need to look for money to actually do the project. But we are essentially having it in a shape that's ready to go when the funds do get available. And what we might be learning from maintenance of the Milwaukee forest in terms of stewardship, we can sort of incorporate into the thinking about, how will the school maintain this project? Because at the end of the day, they have to pay to, even if the city got funding to put it in, the maintenance has to be done. The maintenance will. I mean, that's just how it works. So even the projects that I mentioned in Chelsea and Boston, essentially the school has to be the one willing to maintain these practices because once the project is done, it's hard for the city to be sending their, I mean, it's possible, but it's. Yeah. And so it's really also important to train the maintenance staff in terms of how you maintain these systems. So that's all kind of part of the package, if you will, of introducing these kinds of strategies. So as you can see, it makes a huge difference in terms of the quality of life or, the space when you have elements that bring that shade in different forms to the area. This was an existing kickball court that we essentially relocated a little bit because we wanted to put the outdoor classroom area, but it's still being retained because they love these spaces that they currently play with. So we don't want to take anything away from what they are currently appreciative of and want to hold on to, rightly so. But we're trying to think about it in a sort of multi-use fashion. So we propose to have these stands next to the soccer fields, so you could actually put a net and have that turn into a volleyball field. So it's good to sort of think about these things, not just having one use, but the more multifunctional things become, the more you're getting much better bang for the buck that you're spending in terms of investments. This is the area that is all the way to the edge of the site. I didn't mention that when we were looking at the plan, but for those of you who can spot that area, the mural that's supposed to be for Zella, of course, we've only just rendered it with a kind of sense of what the mural could look like, but the kids actually will hopefully get to design it and implement it when the time comes. So the idea is to sort of make this space as much of their personalities and their desires and dreams, so that they are the ones who are like going to be taking care of it, or their generation anyway. And this was the area that we talked a little bit about. Unfortunately, the light here is, you can't really see too much, but these are the kinds of simple sort of nature play strategies or a toolkit, I guess you could choose from, like what you want to really incorporate into the area. But the idea is to just keep it minimal, so it's not like over programmed, but the kids have a way of playing with natural elements, as opposed to always having equipment to carry with them. And again, these are areas where we have the bioswales or the rain gardens, and you can see that there's a slightly different aesthetic. They're not just like flowering trees or plants that produce a certain kind of sort of aesthetic appeal, but they combine the functionality of having fruit trees and flowering trees that actually have a benefit for attracting, being pollinator friendly and having butterflies and other kinds of ecology sort of grow over time. Again, similar elements that you see around, but different kind of views that you're looking at. So that's the canopy structure that we're using to provide shade to the seating area. That's sort of a place where the kids can actually interact with the water that has been collected in the bioswale. So the idea is to have this sort of natural phenomena happen, so that it's not like the environment is constantly changing. So if you see it after a huge downpour, the landscape looks a certain way, and the kids appreciate what's going on, rather than always having this impervious cover to look at. So the idea is to kind of enrich the activities with landscape that actually helps them with the activity, the play area, or sort of however they're choosing to interact with the nature. It makes it feasible and a much better experience. And I think this might be there are a couple more. So again, a food forest was the other piece that we talked about, and it was really something that they were like, what is food forest? So we like, well, it's basically the trees that you grow there provide fruit. And so, it's like, for them, it's a learning experience, but also something that, it's important for them to understand, like, nature and the built environment don't always have to be two separate worlds, but you can bring them together in really interesting ways. That's the Gaga pit that they love and adore. So we definitely kept that as Gaga pit. So it's essentially this structure that they kick the ball around. Yeah, but it's like one of the yeah, that's why they have that fence around it. So that's what they use. But I mentioned the supports for the volleyball court. So this is a soccer court, but you can put a net across and it turns into a volleyball area. So this is, I think, the last slide, and really a plea and a request for all of you to join us whenever we are out there doing this kind of design charrettes. And since this is a public park, we want as many people who are residents around the area, or even if you don't live in Worcester, please do come and sort of help us design these spaces, because, as I said before, these solutions are only as successful. Yes, and actually the Parks Department does have plans to do some interventions to improve the park anyway, and the idea is to sort of provide them some different ways of incorporating hydrology and rain gardens and bioswales, et cetera, as they're improving the park. So it's sort of the best way to marry the two things. Yeah, that's just a thank you.
Thank you, Pallavi, very much. That was really great. It's, seeing two-dimensional plans takes getting used to. Seeing them in 3D is where you really get community engagement. And we learned in our work that it's worth paying extra for the renderings to be produced. It takes time and it takes money, but that's when people can actually visualize. And then you get their buy-in and you get traction and implementation. So that's really important. But CoolPocket is kind of a name that we coined in Worcester as we were thinking, like, what is it that we're talking about? So if you Google it, I don't know if anything else will come up. But the main idea, though, is that depending on a site, it will look completely different, right? So no one CoolPocket is exactly the same. It's customized to the conditions, like physical conditions as well as people's preferences. And so the cool thing about the CoolPocket is that for the Vernon Hill design, that will look very different from the Columbus Park. And it's really fun to come and do that kind of visioning. So we do encourage you to come. We have flyers that we'll pass out. One thing that I just wanted also to add to the maintenance piece, because that's really is the really big one. In our Department of Sustainability and Resilience, we have been talking internally about green infrastructure maintenance and investing more resources into it, potentially coming through different funding sources that we are looking at, but through our department, because it feels like a good fit. And so if we we are able to implement it, then we can then consistently maintain rain gardens, CoolPockets, Miyawaki forests, and if there's like a constant funding source, then you can engage people and volunteers, but it will be ongoing support. We learned a lot from doing our early rain gardens, which did not do well, not because they were not implemented correctly, but because they were not maintained well afterwards.
So are you saying that now your department is going to maintain?
We are looking into possibility we really want to, and there's some pieces are coming together, but I'm not, obviously, I cannot say that we're committing until it's official and worked out, but yes.
I should add to, just give you some sort of a perspective. So I designed a whole bunch of bioswales and rain gardens in Cambridge and Boston. And, this was the work I was doing when I was working at the Charles River Watershed Association. And, we were really working with different city departments. I mean, if you know Boston, like DPW has its own sort of, kingdom, and Parks has its own. And it was really a process to try and kind of have people work through the silos that exist. And so today, after like 15 years of doing this kind of advocacy, there is a Office of Green Infrastructure in the city of Boston, and there's a director of green infrastructure who's actually, that is her job, essentially, to figure out how to not only implement all these things that we were designing at that point in time, but also figure out how those are going to be maintained. So there's a green jobs component of this, there's training. So there's a whole lot of pieces that, can build capacity within the municipalities, and also get funding from different aspects of job training versus, creating skill sets.
If they're managing stormwater better, can come from sewer and water rates, because that's part of stormwater.
Yes, so there's something called stormwater utility. Now I'm talking totally about Boston projects. I mean, not. Yeah, but it's not exactly. And the reason I say this, that it's not to say that you're going to have to wait 15 years, but if you start at this level, it does take time to get the operations end of things in place for it to become sort of the way everybody wants to do business, rather than it being a one-off project.
Right, and creating green infrastructure elements as part of the cool pocket at the school is not going to maintain it, right? What we are considering is that they would maintain the equipment if we upgrade their playground or, painting the volleyball courts. But if
They
it's
don't feel they can use it.
our schools are chronically under-resourced. There's only one facility person on the school property, and his main attention is on the school building itself. So the schoolyard is always an afterthought. So I feel like, building something really sparkly and then moving on is making it to fail. In 10 years, it will be falling apart, right? So thinking about it, okay, if it's framed in terms of these are green infrastructure or stormwater infiltration or all these like sustainability features, then maybe it's something we can, as a Department of Sustainability, can say, we'll take care of it. If it's a playground, probably not. So we can work it out and think this through. We have made these decisions, obviously. This is just a design concept. We wanted to dream big. We didn't want to be too constrained. We wanted to ask kids to think outside the box and not think about money. Afterwards, there are going to be cost estimates, there are going to be cost ranges, there are going to be talks about how to implement it and then how to maintain it and what makes most sense. So you had a question?
I'm just curious about CoolPockets itself and then the heat island effect. And is there a plan to then measure? Like I noticed in none of the pictures there's a thermometer. And I was wondering if that
Is part of the.
is part of it, and is there a more global idea to say, if there are 4 of these, we'll hopefully see X reduction in temperature or whatever?
So the answer to that question is, it's not something that we've built into the system right now, but remember the sea heat project that I talked about that is being done by BU in Chelsea and East Boston? They've actually put in these sort of thermal temperature monitors in different, and for now it's just they're analyzing data to see what amount of a difference that's happened. And a lot of the graduate school, I'm looking at school graduates who are doing this kind of real-time work. Might be a good project for you to take on. But the idea is to sort of build a data-based sort of assessment of how they are performing over time and how much of a difference it makes, and how many do you need to do sort of, at a given square footage or whatever to make a substantial difference.
And what opportunities are there to build that into curriculum of an elementary school?
Yes.
I know we talked about high school, and but this is K through 6, I believe. And that would be really great. So Clark University is doing measurement of our Miyawaki forests before and after. So yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah, and the 6th grade is actually they do the water unit in the 6th grade, and so there's a water unit, and then there's a what do you call the atmosphere unit. I think that also either that happens in 6th grade or 8th grade, but there are 3 different. The reason I'm so specific about this is because we had a project in 5 schools across Boston that were done as pilots, and they were essentially built. And the idea was to simultaneously develop educational curriculum that the teachers could teach while these practices were being implemented in the schoolyard. So there is precedence of where it's happened before.
Yeah, and one of the things I was just looking up as a teacher myself, there's a civics action project that all students from grades 8 through 12 have to accomplish to be able to graduate from a public school. And it would be really fascinating to see if we could blend some of this together in some capacity. Again, just thinking down the road, not thinking today or tomorrow, but I think that's fascinating. I really do.
Other questions? Hassan?
just on, so the Luba started it out, she said like this is like a conceptual mapping that you're doing. It's like if you were to like first of all like how much funding would all of this require first, and if you get it, how much time would it take to execute this? And just building upon that question, is there prior precedent of that like before, like in your conceptualization during the maybe at the end of the day it's a cool pocket, right?
Yes.
How much cooling are you seeing? Is that in LA?
Your questions are totally what we expect graduate students to be asking, because yes, all that is something that we are going to be working on as we move forward. This particular stage of the project is just to kind of understand the needs of the site, who are the users, what are their dreams and ambitions in terms of what they'd like to see. And then we get into the whole, implementation timeline and, what we can use for different kinds of strategies and approaches. As I mentioned, there are like 5 different kinds of permeable pavement. Like I'm not at this stage going to say like, this is what we're going to use, but all that will have to kind of work back and forth with the city and what the maintenance protocols look like today. And as Luba mentioned, the school doesn't have the capacity, and so we need to think about. So all those choices will govern what the final concept design ends up being, and then we sort of put in the costs and get it to schematic and then construction documentation, and it goes out to the bid, and you see what the bids come back. And, there's a lot of process that still needs to happen. And then the monitoring, of course, that you mentioned, for us to see how these systems are performing in real time.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. Please keep following us. We will provide updates on the project on our website. I know a lot of you already signed up probably for our Green Worcester newsletter that Jessie works hard on pushing out. And so, yeah, we would love community involvement. And I just wanted to mention Pat. She was helping those 6th or 5th graders, with the water unit and taking them to Coles Pond. Do you want to mention quickly?
Yeah, we did it last year with the 5th grade out. So that would be the group that you worked with. To Coach Reservoir, we do a science day with folks from Worcester State and Clark.
We're going to be doing in June 7th. Yeah.
We would love to see more of this kind of like curriculum at every grade level, at every school.
And I just went, Columbus Park is a fabulous school. They've got just great teachers and great principal, really good school. Yeah.
That's what it felt like. Jessie and I were at the at the workshop with the kids, and so it was 2 groups, 1 hour each, and we hit every single 6th grader. So they broke up them into 2 groups, and the teachers were there, and you could feel the engagement and excitement. Yeah, I mean, I must say the MVP grant that they've been very generous with the city. We do have a pretty large environmental justice area and a lot of need. So they've been generous with us, but because we have the need. So we have a lot of hope, and we'll work hard
to apply right away.
Yeah, not right away. One of the grant deadlines passed, and we were not ready to apply, not until cost estimates are developed. The timing wasn't working out. So either next spring, or if any other grant comes up that fits into this criteria, there's a lot of funding coming from the federal level as well. They're tougher to apply for and administer, but there's money, so it's just a matter of funding priorities.
And is it a definitive that your department would take on management?
No, it's not definitive. But it's something we have considered because we are seeing a vacuum, right? And someone needs to fill it, and we seem to fit in terms of what our department does. At the same time, it is green infrastructure management, so it could also fit within DPW. they're not as eager about these kind of projects because they're really dealing with their core functions.
But they've done some great stuff.
Yeah, it's the maintenance. Implementation, it may seem like a lot of money, but it's like the easy part.
Yeah.
So what often happens is that you, as a department, you hire a landscaper for the whole site.
Right.
And that landscaper just goes and mows the whole thing, including the rain garden.
Right.
Even if it's in the specification that you don't do it. So it really requires a separate contract with a company or organization that knows how to do it well, and hopefully an educational component where you can bring youth and train them to do that as
So
well.
is that the model Boston has now, do you think?
Yeah, so they have a core, a group called Power Core, and it's basically sort of came about at the same time when the Green Infrastructure Department of the city was brought together by the mayor. And they now have like training programs for, graduate students, some high school students as well. They can get certified, and then they have the sort of credentials that they need to be able to join a landscape company to do this kind of maintenance, all summer long, because that's of course, you have the right people in office, let me just say. They have what it takes to lead this work. So I think I'm very optimistic about, this taking off in a big way. Sure.
Thank you.